Hey guys, I recently had the opportunity to co-present at an annual conference that was all focused on leadership as it pertains to mergers and acquisitions and business transactions. Naturally, I geeked out on this topic. My co-presenter, Johanna, was absolutely fantastic. Her focus was how do we recruit the right talent? My focus was how do we build the right talent? Enjoy.
So as we move on, here's what we're going to talk about today. So basically, why leadership matters. You can see those two lovely people up there. They're standing in front of you now. The big thing is, you can read the slide. I want them to get started now. So we're going to have Johanna go first. And she's going to talk about hiring for success, or hiring for leadership success. So when you're ready, would you like the clicker? Because you got one slide. Okay, no clicker. All right, just let me know.
You
got you covered.
You got me covered, yeah. Yeah, like John said, thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I mean, everything that we're doing is about people, and everything that we're talking about today is about people and the interaction and uncovering the needs and the value assets that everybody brings to the table. So I'll get started. I'm going to keep my portion a little bit shorter. We find a lot of value in giving you some information, but also interacting and getting some feedback through questions and answering as we go, because that's where Sean and I thrive on a daily basis. When you're looking at selling your company or buying a company, you are looking at a couple of different things, right? So you're looking at making sure that the financials are in alignment, or at least you have them outlined, you know what's going on. You're looking at operational efficiencies. You're looking at market positioning, and you're looking at what I call the people part. The people part is the hardest part because that's where all of the unknown sits, right? So we deal with people all the time. We talk to people. People tell us things, and then we go, but is that what they really mean, right? So we've even gone to the point of looking at body language and word use training. So we actually uncover a lot of things through that as well. That ties into soft skills. It's really easy to look at a resume, right, and say, oh, they've done this, they've done that, they've done this. Okay, that's great. That's the easy part. The hard part is uncovering the soft skills. So as a company, if I'm selling or I'm buying, what am I looking for, right? So if I've got to build out a team to sell my company in a year or two, you should be thinking about it at least 2 years in advance. If I'm looking to sell my company, what kind of leadership team do I need to get me to that point? And then working backwards. Again, the technical skills are really easy, but we've got to uncover the soft skills, okay? So the way that we want to do that is looking at a couple of different things. So first thing is looking at accountability. Is the person accountable? Can they hold themselves accountable? And are they able to hold other people accountable? That means, can they have an uncomfortable conversation and say, Julie, I'm not quite sure that you did that right. You do everything amazing. But having that uncomfortable conversation, right? Being accountable, holding other people accountable, making sure that they're strategic. How do you know if someone's strategic? Does anybody know? Anybody? Has anybody done a behavioral assessment? Like 100, right? So if you look at my behavioral assessment, it screams strategy. I am a strategy all across the board. You've got to find someone who's strategic. So here's a little tip. If you have them do a behavioral assessment, or if you ask them specific questions, you can actually uncover if they're strategic or not. You know who those people are? Anybody? Your introverts. Your introverts are your strategic. That's who you want to look at. So if someone comes into an interview and they don't talk a lot, and you're like, man, hard to pull stuff out of them, they're an introvert. Or they're really scared, but you know, one
Does
or the
anybody
other.
know why introverts usually excel in strategic roles?
Because they're focused, not distracted.
They're focused.
100%.
They think a lot before they talk, whereas the extroverts, they probably need to think more before they talk. Yeah, exactly.
So true. So true. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, no, 100%. So make sure they're strategic and that they can be accountable. Make sure that they're collaborative. How do you know if someone's collaborative? Are they a coach? right? Looking at their background, that is one area you can look at their background and say, okay, well, have they been a part of a sports team? Have they coached? Do they coach Little League? Any of those kind of things will come into play, because if they can't get everybody to get on the same page and work with your team and get to the same mission and vision that you're trying to get to, it's completely pointless. I can graduate from Cornell, have an MBA in this, a doctorate in that, and I can be completely useless. Completely useless. So it's looking at all of the different soft skills. And on that note, Sean, I'll let you pick up.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a unique career trajectory. I spent the majority of my life as the extremely introverted IT nerd. And about 8 years ago, had the opportunity to also start leading human resources. I know, break your brain. It definitely broke mine. Going from all data, logic, process into 2,000% emotion all day, every day. It was extremely challenging, but it also changed the entire trajectory of my life. It helped me understand how powerful leadership is. Because up until that point in my life, I had spent all of my time and energy, what can Sean accomplish? What can Sean do? The big house, the cool cars, all the things. And that year forced me to turn all of my energy and effort into the people on my team. How can Sean build up Sally and help her become successful? How can Sean build Jason and coach him and guide him and help him be successful? And whenever I did that, I noticed that all ships rose with the tide. That is an extremely powerful place to be. And after about 2.5 years of doing that, the company that I worked for, 9 Energy Service, which Matt probably knows very well, they gave me the opportunity to start a project management office to lead all integrations from an M&A perspective. And then they said also, hey, why don't you start ESG function? 2 more years go by, they said, hey, why don't you start leading safety? And then transportation. And I said, that is a lot. And after being with that company for over a decade, I was leading all the corporate functions. The only reason I was able to successfully do that is because I had poured all of my time and energy into building the director, then VP of IT, building the director of HR into a VP of HR, building everybody on the team. And when you have the right people on the team, you can accomplish incredible things. And another thing that I've come to realize, there's 2 ways to get the right talent in your team. You can build it, or you can buy it, or hire or recruit the right talent. As senior leaders in a business, you have got to understand what the business needs and what are the capabilities of the people in your team. Find out what motivates and inspires them. What are they good at? How do they want to excel? Find the needs of the business and then create alignment. That's the key. And that's why I was so excited about us to come in and talk about this topic, because those are the 2 options that we really have. So I have a lot of experience in mergers and acquisitions. All of it pretty much is post-transaction on the integration side of things. I know we have a lot of people in this room that are pre-transaction. Does anybody have any ideas on what percentages of transactions are deemed a failure in terms of their inability to achieve their strategic goals?
80%.
Yeah, 70, 80. I've even seen 90 in some instances. Why do you think that is? You can have the right technology systems. You can even have the right processes, but if you don't have the right people in your organization, none of that matters. People, processes, and technology. That's the order of operations, and it all starts with the people. So all of you have expressed challenges and questions around, okay, how do I find the right people? How do I know if I have the right, can they be developed, or do I have to go outside? And we've had a lot of questions around that right now. So that's what we're going to get into. Let's see, what do we have?
All right. So now we'll start. If you're done.
I'm done.
All
Yeah.
right, so we'll go into this fireside chat. So at this point, kind of my philosophy of doing this whole working with adults that own small businesses for 30 years, we need to know what you want to know, because these 2 know a lot, and it won't matter if you're sitting there going, dude, who cares? So you say, hey, here's why I'm here, here's what I want to know, what's your input, and then with the rest of the think tank that's right now, especially this location, is worth $1 million an hour, let's get it started. Fireside.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
There we go.
Okay, do you want us to take questions? Okay, Bill.
Yeah, why is it that leaders in some cases cannot let go? Meaning, their job, I guess, as a leader is not to play better, it's to get the other guy to play better. That seems to be a transition that has to be acquired or learned in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean, if you're gonna sell your business, you have to have a strategy, and it all starts with that. What is the strategy? What am I trying to accomplish? And then coming up with that plan. If your current leadership team is not the people to get you there, the plan to get you there, then you need to take a step back, figure out the plan, and then go that direction. Or as Sean, I'm sure we'll talk about, is building the team that you already have. Because yes, we have people within our team that may be really strong and they may be weak in another area, but how can we get them to that next level?
So what comes to mind whenever I hear that question is we have countless examples of undeveloped leaders promoting undeveloped leaders.
100%.
Just because you're the smartest or most brilliant engineer in the room, that does not mean you can successfully lead a team of engineers. The requisite skills and knowledge that it takes to be able to effectively communicate to different personality types. If you're leading a team of engineers, yeah, you can probably communicate with them on their same level. But if you are leading an engineering team, you have to, very likely, interact with people in other functional domains in the business. Have you ever sat in a room with an engineer and a VP of HR? Yeah. You have extreme extrovert, you have extreme introvert. Both of them are brilliant in their domain, but it's almost like they're speaking a different language. So whenever it comes to people elevating into senior leadership roles, and to answer your question more directly on why don't they let go, because they achieve this level of success by doing this thing, being that individual contributor. I'm the most brilliant engineer. I know what materials, I know what plugs, I know what slips that need to be done. Mm-hmm. And they have people on their team that might have ideas that will also work, but the most senior engineer thinks, I'm the most brilliant person here, I know how this is going to work. And so being able to just let go is a skill that not a lot of people possess, because you have to give up that control. And as humans, we want to be able to control everything in our lives. And whenever you think, I have to give this up to 3 or 4 people on my team and just hope for the outcome to be ideal, because ultimately I'm still accountable for it. So you have to develop those skills around letting go, around delegation, around accountability, around communication. These are all skills that have to be developed so that people can comfortably let go.
And I would hope, just to close that out, I would hope that they'd have a good advisory team around them that's recognizing this, right? The importance of a tight circle of people who are going to push against you and say, Bill, we might want to talk about that a little bit, is very important. So I would hope that they'd have a strong network that's saying we might want to look at this a little bit differently. And I think that's part of that uncomfortable conversation, right?
Okay, we went Jason, the guy next to him, and then this gentleman here.
And then here. Oh.
Jason, how do you remember all that, John?
So for what about when you have a visionary leader who's taking over a company, depending on size, they can't really have HR, but perhaps they suck at leadership, right? So they're not really good at leaders, so then you're having them trying to hire and develop and decide who's going to be in leadership. How do you crack that code? Because if you just have bad leaders hiring bad leaders.
Well, this is where you have to lean on advisory firms like this. And the problem is usually that visionary has a little bit of an ego and thinks that they know what they need. But ultimately, you have to trust someone like this that can come in and say, hey, you are the visionary. Have you ever heard of the term operator? You've got to be able to do this. Yeah. And yes, I know it's going to crush your margins to bring this other person in and pay them to do this piece, but do you want to stay where you're at forever? Or do you want to grow? If you want to grow, this is the approach. You're going to have to bring in that operator, because they're likely not going to be able to develop those skills with anybody in their team unless they lean on a third party.
Yeah, I mean, having someone who is not a strong leader is a detriment. But again, having someone that will push against them and just say, look, you need a visionary and an operator, it's the way to go. I mean, tough conversations.
Gentleman next to, yes.
I was interested in knowing what what do the companies have to have in place to attract the best leaders? You know, we want to go from not hiring people who are out looking for work, but bringing people into our firm that are actively the top leaders, top producers in other companies and pulling them away.
Yeah, that's just such a great question, because that's a hurdle that we come across quite a bit. Understanding what your goal is for the company. Where are you trying to go, and being able to express that to anybody that you're talking with. So anybody that you're interviewing with, okay, here's where we are now, right? But here's where we want to go. It's not where you start, it's where you finish, right? It's not where you are now, it's where you plan to be. So being able to express that, obviously having a strategy around that. Who are we bringing on first, and how do we build that out? So
I'd like to add on to that as well. There's a few things that I've come to realize. I think there's 5 key levers whenever it comes to attracting and retaining the right talent: identity, opportunity, purpose, inclusion, and reward. And every person in this room, every person on all of your teams, sometimes reward is all they care about. These are your salespeople. Not always. But usually you pay them more money, they sell more. Okay? Then you have the people that want opportunity to learn and grow and build their career. So as leaders, we have to understand what's important to all the different people on my team and create an environment that is conducive to their growth and helping them achieve the things that are important. Now, when you do that, you create a brand and reputation for your company. And when I say brand, I'm not talking about a cool logo. I'm talking about how people associate to your company. Yes, I want to work for this company. Your own employees are going to go out and start recruiting for you. You've got to come work for Artemis. It is absolutely incredible here. So when you do that, your employees help facilitate getting the right people in the door, and then all of a sudden you have an inbound or inflow that you get to be real picky and choosy on to make sure that you get the right fit.
And in the interview process, be very clear about where you're going. We see that a lot where organizations will not talk about where they're trying to go, what they're trying to achieve, what their culture is. Culture is huge, right? You don't go to family reunions because the people that are there, right? We're all guilty of it. It's the same concept. They've got to understand what they're walking into. I believe transparency is so key when you're hiring. The good, the bad, the ugly. It's like when you go on the first date and everybody says, oh, we're all wonderful, right? You get to the third one and you're like,
they're not wonderful.
Not so impressive, right? Just rip the Band-Aid and just put it all out on the table. Because if you want somebody on your team that can be your cheerleader and guide the rest of the team, then they need to be on the same page with you.
All right, awesome. Yes, go ahead.
So just with a high failure percentage, and you've done so much post work, what's the pre-work that needs to be done before transaction?
Oh, my man, I love that question. Okay. Yes, who was in this session before us? Okay, perfect, great, y'all on the right track. All right. So there's a lot of the technical specs and things that you have to look like the financial, everything that we covered in the last section. I think one of the big misses is making sure that you have a leadership team in place that can actually guide through the transaction. So once it is done, and I see a lot of transactions that really suffer from key man risk, where the entrepreneur, the business owner, I see everyone's nodding their head here. That is a major issue. And usually because they are the visionary and sometimes they're also the operator, the business can't operate without them, which actually has a downward pressure on the pricing of the organization, because those that are doing the buying, they know that. They know that that's a risk. So I think what's important is for leaders to understand this dynamic and say, I need to build a team where this company can operate without me. And a beautiful litmus test is if I can step away for a vacation for a month and turn my phone off and the company not go to shambles, that is a great place to start. But again, you have to hire the right people. The right people are going to cost you money. And so you have to have this long-term strategic vision and say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm willing to forego some profits here to get the right people in the door so that I can maximize the opportunity for the exit. Did I answer? I kind of bounced around a lot. Did that help? Yeah.
And we'll see whenever we're coming in to hire like an executive or a leadership role, where individuals who are actually looking to sell their business within a year or two, and they'll say, well, I only want to pay this amount. And when we look at the big picture of what they're trying to do, it's like you're going to have to come to the table with something different. If you want the quality, you have to pay for the quality, because it's going to return you down the road. So,
John, we've got a bunch of questions up
Who's
here
next?
too, but I know you're keeping
next,
track.
Right here.
Yep.
And then
And-
you dip
and we've-
first, and then here.
And then
there.
and then here too. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I'm glad y'all are keeping
This is
track.
great.
Okay, just a couple things. One, I was in the session and this one before, and so those of you who will probably remember me saying, well, first of all, Marie Diaz, CEO for CEO Impact. So one of the things that comes to mind is that when you're choosing people, first of all, it's great to not choose people like you. And that's what CEOs do. So hiring advisors to help you do that choice is important, because they're looking at the role and responsibilities, not the people. Because we as CEOs a lot of times want to hire someone just like us or our friends, because they sell you on the idea that they're good at what they do. But the point of the matter is that you have, as a CEO, a fiduciary responsibility to grow an organization. So therefore, your employees are they can get paid, first of all, but you also have a fiduciary responsibility to your banks, because if you're going to be bankable, then you have to be able to understand what that even means as a CEO. So therefore, you can afford advisors to come in and help you structure those deals. The other comment I wanted to make is, there's a book by Marshall, what got you here doesn't get you there. So when I'm training CEOs, I let them know, look, if you've never been beyond a $10 million mindset, you got to hire an advisor to help you get to a $20 million mindset. But the same thing holds true for your team. You hired people to get you here, but they won't get you there. So what's important is, and I'm sure that you guys use profiling, because profiling helps you see, sometimes you got to let people go. And I certainly believe that God tells us that you actually push them and nudge them to do the things that they're supposed to do. Think about COVID. COVID is probably the #1 period that allowed people, because they got furloughed or fired or whatever, that they went and did things that they said they would do but never did, because they were comforted by a job that paid them X amount of dollars.
All right.
So just wanted to say that, but also wanted to tell you, ambivert.
Yep.
So you can be an extrovert.
That's right.
Introvert, ambivert.
So you.
We'll go to the, you want
Yeah, I want to elaborate on that just really quickly, because you touched on an important part as far as the steps involved with organizations as they grow and scale. People are the same way. And whenever I look at a lot of the transactions that I've been a part of, you might have a $1 billion organization that acquires a company that's a $100 million company. They're at two very different stages of their life cycle in terms of maturity as an organization. This business here at 100 million, very respectable for sure, but the talent that got them to 100 million, they're not going to have the same skills necessary to successfully operate at $1 billion. So the senior leaders of the acquiring entity and the acquired entity need to lean into effective communication, understanding behavioral assessment. How do I close this gap? Because they likely have systems and processes in place that this company needs to adopt to continue to grow and scale. There's the value prop of both.
I'd like to add to this, and the reverse is true. If you take somebody from $1 billion company, put them in a $100 million company, he learned to have resources available to him, and almost any mess up or it's covered, and they achieve things, and they go to the $100 million or $10 million. I've seen a lot of companies, small companies, get ruined because they got top talent in a company that doesn't match their size. And these guys will need to, every now and then, roll up their sleeves and be hands-on, but they don't know how to do it. They're used.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And
John.
yeah, we warn against that quite a bit. Now there are times, so that's 95% of the time. There are times, just to keep that in mind, where there is someone who was at a larger organization and maybe they were there a year or two, and you start to question why did they leave. It's probably because that culture was not the right fit for them and they wanted to be more entrepreneurial. So don't just But yes, you're exactly correct.
I'm in that
Who was next?
situation. I was, and I wanted to do entrepreneurial. I was exactly in the same shoes.
Yeah.
You reach a point where
Yeah.
you say, "I want to do it," but you better be prepared
Mm-hmm.
to, the gentleman that left, that you can, you want to,
Yeah.
you're going to clean things.
Yeah.
You're going to change. Yeah.
Correlation with the same dreams.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
So-
so
Yeah, I think-
there you go. Thank you
Yeah.
for waiting patiently.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. What are some variables that business owners that are growing should consider on whether they decide to build the talent internally or whether they decide to hire and recruit externally?
I think it kind of aligns with the strategic goals and timelines for the organization. If I'm just going to go back into some numbers. If you're a $10 million organization, you want to get to $50 million in 2 years, there's a very slim chance the talent you have in-house that you're going to be able to develop them enough to get you there based on that ramp rate. So you likely have to bring talent in from the outside that has experience operating at $30, $50 million and then bring them in. Now the challenge that you then run into is assimilating them into the culture. You have very rapid growth and then the cultural assimilation piece, getting everybody to get along. Behavioral assessments are important. That is a key component of it. But if you have a longer time horizon at which you want to build the business, then I encourage people to lean into developing the people on their team, because you build an insane amount of trust and loyalty and respect. When you just say, hey, here is our goal and vision, and this is where I need you to be, this is where you are at today, I'm going to invest in a coach, I'm going to invest in developing you and building you, all of a sudden they're like, holy cow, no company has ever invested in me. I'm locked in for life. That help? Yes.
One of the problems I've seen is companies hiring, thinking that that's the team. And just because you hire a superstar or you hire someone that supposedly knows what they're doing, people give them too much power too quickly. I always say, you've got to have someone in your company at least a year or two to even trust them when your back's turned. And too many people go, well, I've got this great advisor, or I got this great person, like building a sports team. If you do not really know that person and giving them the trials and errors that, hey, might get recruited next week, big CO, gone.
Hire, promote slow, fire fast.
Right.
Those are uncomfortable conversations.
Do you have feedback for that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so I'd like to tap into what Maria said earlier. First of all, you like to go there and then here. When you are hiring, make sure that you have other people on your team interviewing the person, especially if you want to make sure they're not hiring the same person as you are, right? So make sure you have other people interviewing them. But repeat your question. I'm so sorry. I'm like sidetracked with like 3 different conversations.
There could be a timeline of trust before you have trust. It's like, you could date someone for 6 months, live with them for 10 years, you'll see the difference.
No, 100%.
That was my question. What do you think is a reasonable timeline that you could go, okay, I could take that 1 month vacation?
I don't know about a reasonable timeline, but I do know that I do know that you need to look at personally developing them, like Sean's been talking about. So you're right. You can't just trust them off the bat. Just bring them in and, hey, I can turn my back and walk away.
What would you call a reasonable number that you could feel that person has established themselves as, as a backup quarterback?
What are they doing? How are they performing? What are they showing you on a daily basis? That's the result.
Okay.
Well, one thing that I've seen over the years is high performers usually start from day one as a high performer.
Yeah.
So I guarantee every single person in this room has either hired somebody or had somebody hired into their team, and by the end of the first week, they're like, oh God, what have we done? So usually there are signs and indications right from the start, and what happens is senior leaders, their ego kind of gets in the way. Well, this is, a board member's friend's son, whatever. And so now I'm stuck with them for a little while instead of having that uncomfortable conversation. Now, this should be vetted during the interview process, and this is when, it's beneficial to work with someone like Artemis, where they vet all of this, not just their behavioral assessments, but what are their skills and their aptitudes in certain areas. So,
And a behavioral assessment's not going to give you everything you need. It's just a starting point. Sean will tell you that. We'll tell you that. It's a starting point. It's just a data point.
All right, so we'll go here. And then there.
And then here.
So I hand there.
Yeah.
And well, that hand right over there. We'll have to-
Your behavioral assessment is do you have a favorite tool that you use to determine leadership ability prior to?
So we've looked at lots of them, and it kind of depends on what you're trying to look for. And Sean may have a different take on this. We like predictive index, and here's why we like it. It takes 5 to 7 minutes to take, and it's extremely accurate. What it's showing us is the drivers of the person: introvert, driven, are they social, are they not social? We're looking for drivers because that goes back to those soft skills. So that's just one that we prefer.
What was it again?
Predictive index, PI. And you could take a free one online and try it out.
So we'll actually lean into DISC behavioral assessments more than most others. Sometimes we'll go into Berkman if it's somebody who's a developed leader and familiar with that. I like DISC because it's so simple and easy to grasp. And a lot of times leaders, they think they know about how to communicate with people, but they really don't. And so ultimately, you have a pie, you break it up into 4 quadrants, you have driven, you have extroverts, and then conscientious and support or collaborative. So you have these different quadrants, and the thing that I love about it is it scales across organizations beautifully. As an example, when I stepped in and started leading human resources, there's about 18 people on the team. 17 of them were extreme extroverts, and myself and the payroll manager were the only 2 people that cared about attention to detail. So you can imagine the challenges. We're reaching out to these HR business partners. Why can't you get their social right? Why can't you get their bank account? They don't care. Right? They care, but not as much. And so when you look at a team and where everybody falls, then you can start being more intentional about hiring for specific behavioral traits. We need somebody who's going to drive projects across the finish line. We need somebody who's going to focus in on the accuracy of the information. So that's why we lean into DISC.
All right, to the front. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're at you, Melissa.
No, that was a good segue, actually. Thank you. Sorry about that. So my question is really more around development, and so in its internal development. And so, and I hate to use the word generational, but for lack of a better word, that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now. Is that internal generational pull right there to develop. And the struggle is I'm trying to change my mindset from they're lazy, they're not focused, to they're not lazy, they are focused, they're just differently focused.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to find ways to kind of bridge that gap to define that loyalty and just retain that talent to move forward here and to develop their careers.
Yeah, so I would highly recommend everybody in this room pick up a book by Jason Dorsey. It's called Z-Economy. Jason Dorsey, Z-Economy. Z-Economy. And it touches on every generation. So I was just at a conference speaking with Janine Driver. She's a body language expert for the CIA and FBI. And we were with Jason, and we learned some really interesting information about the differences between the different generations and some of the things that you think you're seeing in like the millennials and Gen Z are probably not accurate. The one fun fact is that the millennials are the only generation where we've seen a huge split. So where we have the millennials, like they don't care about anything but themselves, and then the ones who are actually driven. So be careful whenever you're interviewing anybody within that range. Don't just put them in that bracket. And that's where some of those behavioral questions come into play, and you can understand where they fall.
And I'd add on to that, I think it's important for you to take the time to understand what the younger generation, what is important to them beyond TikTok. Like figuring out what's, I know, it is very challenging, and that's...
It's actually, it's very easy. You ready? Gen Z is going to convert right back to the baby boomers. They don't think they're going to have Social Security. They think they're going to have to work till they're 85. The reason that your Gen Zs don't stay after 5 o'clock is because they think they're going to have to work forever. So that's why they're not lazy. They just think they have to work forever. They save money. They're going to want to save money. If you look at all of your 13 to 29-year-olds, I bet you anybody that you know says, oh, I go to Goodwill to buy clothes. I love shopping at resale shops. They don't like to spend money. So they're not lazy. They're just extremely conservative with their time and their energy because they feel like they're going to have to work a really long time. But they're very smart, and they're going to go back to being very much like the baby boomers. Because think about it. What did they experience in the prime of their lives? COVID. What did baby boomers experience?
The Great Depression.
So that's what's happening with them.
I want to piggyback off that. You guys give us the tools to really identify the types, but how do you get the most out of each of them? Is there like a playbook on that, or?
I'm sorry. So we've talked about a lot of different types, a lot of different things.
Identifying the personality types.
Oh, yeah.
And from there, how do you get the most out of each of them? Is that just something you learn over time, or is that something that there's kind of a playbook for?
Yeah. So
It's all kinds of different CEOs, different
quick.
founders.
Who has taken a behavioral assessment? Quick show of hands. Okay. Now, after you took the behavioral assessment, who read through it?
Me, yeah.
Okay. Now, who went through some sort of a workshop based on? Okay.
Right.
So, perfect. All right. So when you actually take the time, you take the assessment, you read through it. Oh, that checks out. Yeah, that's me. Cool. You put it in a drawer. When you actually go through some sort of a workshop and understand, okay, Jason is dominant, direct, driven. He's going to take this project and run it through the wall. Okay, Sharon, she is highly analytical, suffers from paralysis analysis, is petrified. Jason, if you run this through the wall, I'm going to have all this mess, these bricks. It's going to be a nightmare. Jason's just like, I want to go run through this wall. And so what happens when you start understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each of them, you pair them up and say, Jason, Sharon, I know you're going to struggle, but you have to get through that. Maybe there's a door you can just kind of go around. You don't have to tear the wall down, right?
Yeah.
But as a leader, you have to understand the strengths and weaknesses across both of them and have a common vision, goal, mission, direction that they can all get behind, and then trust each other. You create that environment as the leader. When they trust each other, they trust you. All of a sudden, they're going to come together, and there's going to be some conflict. But as a leader, you make sure that it is productive conflict and you support them moving through. Once they get to the other side of the wall, whether it's a door, window, whatever, all of a sudden they now trust each other more and know how to effectively work with one another.
All right, so the gentleman right here on the corner, you still has your question?
Yeah, I just, you had made that comment about a new hire comes on and they're going to be a high performer from day one, or you see them very quickly and who did we hire or whatever. But sometimes I think, I always wonder, is that if they're different from your own personality, is that they're not like me, so who are they? And sometimes or maybe as a team, we have a gap in our team, you try and plug that, but then the team is generally just pushing back rather than embracing the change that the team has to make as well.
Yeah, so I always say conflict is good. Productive conflict is good. And we always like to be around the people that we're the most like. But if you can sit with your team or help work through strategies, and that's where Sean really comes into play, is figuring out, okay, well, we may be different. Like Julie and I are completely different. I'm a huge introvert. Surprise, surprise. Julie is not. So she is very good for me on a daily basis, even though sometimes it's hard. So that's where the conflict comes in. So being able to understand, look, I'm good at this, you're good at that, you're good at that. Tom's much better over here. But understanding where everybody knows where the value sets lie on the team. The faster you uncover that and say, look, I'm not good at attention to detail. Julie's amazing at it, right? Tom likes to focus over here. Putting it out in the open quickly helps big time.
This is such a great topic because if we put ourselves in the extreme extrovert shoes, they know they need that hyper analytical person. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean, just because they know that skill set, it does not mean they know how to create an environment where that person can be successful.
That's right.
So they have to develop skills around communication and taking time to understand and slow down. Okay, I'm not going to understand how AI works, but I need you to break it down for me so that you can kind of build the bridge between, and again, as the leader, you have to be able to create that environment for the new person coming in. And then super fun, you have to do it for every single person on your team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned rewards as a big component of that in regards to hiring, attracting, and retaining the top people. How critical is it to really incentivize really that top 20% of your leadership team to think and act like an ownership through compensation?
So whenever you start getting into comp strategies for an organization, this is something during my time, my previous life, was responsible for kind of building the comp strategy for the organization. We lean very heavily into a rich healthcare and benefits plan, like off of the charts, the nicest healthcare plan. I think we subsidized over 90%. It was ridiculous. Now, there's only so much money to go around. So you have to figure out, as I look comp strategy for the overarching organization, if I want to attract and retain that senior level talent that is experienced, I need to have a very rich healthcare plan. I also, I can only split $1 so many ways. I might have shareholders that I have to be able to allocate to. I have salaries, so I can't just say I have the best healthcare plan, period, but I'm only going to pay you minimum wage. That's not going to work. So you have to figure out the allocation ratio of where you spend that money. And then whenever you have, I'm going to talk about oil and gas, what we started to see is the back office functions, senior leadership and corporate functions, they appreciated opportunity for growth and a very rich healthcare plan. The guys out in the field, they thought they were bulletproof. They didn't care about healthcare. They just wanted dollars in their pocket.
Yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. They're like, I don't care about healthcare. I want more money in my pocket. So whenever you start looking at overarching strategies for comp across the business, that can be complex. And again, understanding the different subsets of the population and what's important to all of them, that is a pretty massive exercise to go through.
Yeah, the last point.
So, awesome. I was notified there was 2 minutes left a minute ago. So, all
Oh,
right.
man. Us
Connect
run
with them on
over?
LinkedIn as well, because I'm not going to get in the way of your food on the pre-Valentine's Day. So if you could give a round of applause for our presenters.